They say blood is thicker than water, but they forget to mention it can be as toxic as mercury. I spent my youth building castles on sand for people who called me a daughter to my face but an ATM behind my back. Under a crystal chandelier worth a year's salary, I heard my verdict. You have never given this family anything I didn't cry. I just unlocked my phone, opened my banking app, and hit cancel. My name is Taylor Vallon, and standing in the center of the grand ballroom at the Palmer House Hilton, I felt less like a daughter and more like a line item on a corporate expense report. The room was bathed in a golden, amber glow, courtesy of 20 crystal chandeliers that hung from the frescoed ceiling like frozen tears. The air smelled of white lilies and expensive prime rib, a scent that screamed wealth. It was the smell of $150,000. To be exact, that was the figure I had transferred from my personal savings account 3 months ago to pay for this night. It was the 40th wedding anniversary of Richard and Cynthia Vallon. An event that had to be perfect because my mother did not believe in anything less than perfection, provided she was not the one paying for it. I am 34 years old, and in my professional life, I am the Director of Strategy at Apex Meridian Solutions. My job is crisis management. When a Fortune 500 CEO tweets something offensive at 2 a.m, or when a pharmaceutical company accidentally poisons a water supply, they call me. I walk into boardrooms wearing monochromatic architectural suits. I sit at the head of the table, and I tell powerful men how to save their reputations. I am known for being cold, surgical, and effective. I wear black because it is intimidating, and because it hides the exhaustion. Tonight was no exception. I wore a custom-tailored black silk jumpsuit that cost $4,000, sharp enough to cut glass. With my dark hair pulled back into a severe, sleek bun, I looked like power. I felt like a servant. The guests were arriving in a steady stream of sequins and tuxedos. These were my father's business partners, my mother's bridge club rivals, and a collection of distant relatives who only surfaced when there was an open bar. I stood near the entrance, checking the guest list on my tablet, ensuring the seating chart was adhered to with military precision. "Taylor?" a voice drawled from the doorway. It was my mother, Cynthia. She looked stunning. I had to admit, the emerald gown she wore was vintage Dior, another gift I had tracked down and purchased for her last birthday. She did not look like a woman of 65. She looked like a woman who had spent a fortune on dermatologists, which she had, and which I had also paid for. "Happy anniversary, Mom," I said, leaning in to kiss her cheek, careful not to smudge her makeup. "You look beautiful." She pulled back, her eyes scanning the room, bypassing my face entirely. "The lighting is too dim here. Taylor, I told you I wanted warm light, not this dungeon atmosphere. And where is the band? I don't hear music. Is this what you call ambiance?" I took a breath, the air filling my lungs with the scent of lilies. "The band is setting up for the first set. Mom, they start in 10 minutes, exactly as the schedule dictates, and the lighting is set to candlelight mode because you said fluorescence made you look washed out." My father, Richard, appeared behind her, adjusting his bow tie. He was a tall man who had once been handsome, but had let himself go soft around the middle, a softness protected by expensive tailoring. "The valet line is a disaster," he announced, not greeting me. "We had to wait 5 minutes for our ticket. For the money you claim this place costs, you would think they could hire enough staff to park a car." "I will speak to the manager," I said, my voice flat. I did not mention that I had hired 3 extra valets specifically for this hour. Nothing was ever enough. "Go to your table, number 1, right by the dance floor." They walked past me without a thank you. I watched them go, feeling that familiar, hollow ache in my chest. It was the feeling of pouring water into a cracked vase, hoping it would eventually fill up. 10 minutes later, the doors swung open again, and my brother Kyle walked in. Kyle was 38 years old, 4 years my senior, and he carried himself with the unearned confidence of a man who has never faced a consequence in his life. He was wearing a navy blue Italian wool suit that I had bought him for Christmas. tailored to hide the fact that he had not seen the inside of a gym in 5 years. On his arm was his wife, Jessica, looking bored and scrolling through her phone. "Taylor," Kyle shouted, spreading his arms wide as if he were the host. "Hell of a party. Sis, a little excessive, don't you think? But hey, if you got it, flaunt it, right?" "Hello, Kyle," I said. "Glad you made it. I was worried the traffic would delay you." "Traffic was a nightmare," he laughed, grabbing a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "But the Porsche handles like a dream, man. That sport mode is something else. I almost got a ticket on Lakeshore Drive." He was driving a Porsche Panamera that I leased. The monthly payment was $1,200. I paid it because my parents insisted Kyle needed a reliable vehicle to get to his job interviews. Kyle had been interviewing for 5 years. "Speaking of money," Kyle said, leaning in, his breath smelling of pre-game whiskey, "I have got this new opportunity lined up. Big stuff. Taylor, Web 3.0, decentralized gaming. I just need a little seed capital to get in on the ground floor. We are talking 10,000, maybe 15. Returns are projected at 300% by Q3. "Not tonight, Kyle," I said, turning my attention back to the guest list. "Enjoy the shrimp cocktail." "Always the icicle," Kyle sneered, his smile dropping instantly. "You know, you could try being supportive for once. Dad says this is going to be my year." "Dad says that every year," I replied, not looking up. Kyle scoffed and walked away, guiding Jessica toward the bar. I stood there, the guardian of the gate, while the people I supported lived their lives inside the sanctuary I had built. The photographer I had hired, a man named Leo, who charged $400 an hour, was gathering the family near the cake. The cake was a 6-tier masterpiece covered in gold leaf. My mother was waving her hands, directing people like a traffic cop. "Richard, stand here, Kyle. Get on my right side. Jessica, tuck your hair behind your ear. Perfect." I walked over, ready to take my place on the edge of the frame. I had practiced my smile in the bathroom mirror earlier, a smile that didn't reach my eyes but looked good on camera. As I approached, my mother held up a hand. "Oh, Taylor, sweetheart, hold on a second." She looked at Leo. "Just the immediate family for this one. Please, we want one of just us and Kyle and the grandkids. You know, the legacy shot." I froze. My shoes, black Louboutins with a heel sharp enough to be a weapon, felt like they were nailed to the floor. "I am immediate family. Mom." "Of course you are, dear," she said dismissively, adjusting Richard's lapel. "But you know how cluttered these photos get. We will do one with you later, maybe with the cousins. Just step out for a moment. Actually, could you hold my clutch? It doesn't match the dress in this light." She thrust her beaded clutch into my hands. I stood there, holding my mother's purse, while the flash went off. Flash, flash, flash. They smiled, the happy couple, the golden son, the daughter-in-law, and the 2 grandchildren. I was not in the frame. I was the crew. I was the producer. I was the financier. But I was not in the cast. I felt a tug on my pant leg. I looked down. It was Leo, Kyle's 6-year-old son, and his younger sister, Mia. They were the only reason I hadn't walked out of this family years ago. "Auntie Tay," Leo whispered, his eyes wide. "Grandma is being scary." I crouched down, ignoring the strain on my knees and the risk to my tailored suit. My expression softened, the mask of the cold executive slipping away. "Grandma just wants everything to be perfect," I whispered back. "Hey, did you check the inside pocket of your jacket?" Leo shook his head. "Check it." He reached inside and pulled out a small, velvet pouch. Inside was a rare, limited edition coin he had been talking about for months. Something related to a video game he loved. His eyes went wide. "No way," he squealed. "Shh." I put a finger to my lips, winking at Mia and handing her a small charm bracelet from my pocket. "Our secret. Okay, go smile for the camera so we can eat cake." They hugged me, their small arms wrapping around my neck. For 3 seconds, I felt human. Then Jessica's voice cut through the air. "Leo Mia, get back here. You are wrinkling your clothes." They ran back to the photo, and I stood up, smoothing the invisible wrinkles on my jumpsuit. I retreated to the bar and ordered sparkling water with lime. I wanted vodka, straight up, but I needed to keep a clear head. The night was only half over. Dinner was served, filet mignon and lobster tail. I sat at a table near the back, ostensibly to manage the event, but in reality, because there was no seat for me at the head table. The head table was for my parents, Kyle, Jessica, and my father's most important business partner, a man named Mr. Henderson, who owned a chain of car dealerships. I watched them eat. I watched my father laugh at Kyle's jokes that were not funny. I watched my mother preen under the compliments about the decor, accepting credit for the flowers she hadn't chosen and the wine she hadn't paid for. Then came the speeches. My father stood up, tapping a spoon against his champagne flute. The sound rang out, sharp and clear. The room hushed. He adjusted his microphone, his face flushed with wine and pride. "Thank you all for coming," Richard boomed, his voice projecting well. He was a salesman at heart, even if he hadn't sold anything in a decade. 40 years. Can you believe it? Cynthia and I have weathered storms, raised a family, and built a life we are proud of." The crowd applauded politely. "I have so many people to thank," he continued. "First, I want to thank the good Lord above for his blessings. We have been fortunate, truly fortunate." I took a sip of my water. Fortunate I paid the mortgage on their estate. I paid their health insurance. I paid for the country club membership where he played golf 4 times a week. I want to thank my beautiful wife, Cynthia. You are the rock of this family. Applause. And, his voice grew thicker with emotion, I want to thank my son, Kyle. He gestured to Kyle, who was leaning back in his chair, picking his teeth. "Kyle," my father said, wiping a tear from his eye, "you have always been there for us. Through thick and thin, you are a man of vision, a man of integrity. Seeing the father you have become, the husband you are, makes a father proud. You are the future of the Vallon name. Thank you for your support. Son, we wouldn't be here without you." Kyle raised his glass, looking smug. "Love you, Dad," he shouted. I waited. I gripped the stem of my glass so hard I thought it might shatter. I waited for Ann Taylor. I waited for Ann, my daughter, who made tonight possible. I waited for Ann Taylor, who works 80 hours a week so we can live like kings. Silence. My father looked around the room, beaming. "So, let us raise a glass to 40 more years, to my family, to legacy." To legacy, the room echoed. My name was never spoken, not once, in a speech that lasted 10 minutes, in a room I paid for, surrounded by food I bought, celebrating a life I subsidized. I did not exist. I was the ghost in the machine. I was the infrastructure necessary, silent and completely invisible until something broke. I looked at the untouched lobster on my plate. I looked at my parents, clinking glasses with Kyle. I looked at the bill that was currently sitting in my email inbox, final charges for the open bar, estimated at another $5,000. Something inside me clicked. It wasn't a snap. It was a quiet, heavy locking mechanism sliding into place. It was the sound of a vault door closing. I picked up the glass of champagne that had been placed at my setting for the toast. I hadn't planned on drinking alcohol, but the bitterness in my mouth was unbearable. I drained the glass in one long swallow. The bubbles burned my throat. "One last time," I whispered to the empty chair beside me. I stood up, smoothing my suit. I would not make a scene. I was Taylor Vallon of Apex Meridian. I did not throw tantrums. I executed strategies. I would walk over there, smile at Mr. Henderson, shake my father's hand, and congratulate my mother. I would play the part of the dutiful daughter until the curtain fell. But the audience didn't know that the show was already over. They were clapping for the encore, but I was already dismantling the stage. I signaled the waiter to bring another bottle of the vintage Cabernet to table 1. Let them drink. Let them celebrate. It was the last vintage they would ever taste on my dime. The heavy double doors of the ballroom finally swung shut, sealing away the smell of stale lilies and expensive perfume. The silence that followed was heavy, ringing in my ears like the aftermath of an explosion. While the guests were filtering out into the Chicago night, buzzing with wine and gossip, I was standing at the concierge desk in the main lobby, dealing with the aftermath. The banquet manager, a man named Henri who had been obsequious all evening, now looked tired. He slid a leather folder across the polished marble counter toward me. "The final reconciliation. Ms. Vallon," he said softly. "There were some overages on the bar tab, as we discussed, and the damaged deposit for the carpet in the east wing. Apparently, one of the guests dropped a glass of red wine. I didn't ask who. I knew it was likely Uncle Jerry, or perhaps even Kyle. It didn't matter. I opened the folder. The numbers stared back at me. Black ink on creamy paper. The additional charges amounted to $4,300.50. I pulled the gold fountain pen from my blazer pocket, a gift I had bought for myself when I made partner, and signed the receipt. The total for the evening was now officially over $154,000. "Thank you, Henri," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the fatigue that was seeping into my bones. "Please ensure the staff is tipped generously." I added 20% to the gratuity line. "You are very generous, Ms. Vallon," Henri said, bowing his head slightly. Generous. That was the word people used when they wanted something from you. I turned away from the desk. My parents and Kyle had retired to the VIP hospitality suite on the mezzanine level about 20 minutes ago. It was a private room I had reserved for them to decompress, change their shoes, and gather their gifts before the chauffeur drove them home. I needed to go up there, say my goodbyes, and ensure they had everything they needed. It was the final item on my mental checklist for the night. I took the elevator up to the mezzanine. The hallway was plush, carpeted in a deep burgundy that swallowed the sound of my heels. It was quiet here, a stark contrast to the chaotic energy of the ballroom below. I felt a momentary pang of affection, despite the lack of recognition during the speech. Despite the photos I wasn't in, they were still my family. Maybe, in the privacy of the suite, away from the audience, my father would hug me. Maybe my mother would say, "Thank you, Taylor. It was beautiful." I reached the door of the VIP suite. It was made of heavy mahogany, but it wasn't pulled shut completely. A sliver of light spilled out onto the carpet, and along with it, the sound of voices. I raised my hand to knock, but my knuckles never made contact with the wood. "God, my feet are killing me." My mother's voice drifted through the gap. I told Taylor that the flooring in the ballroom was too hard. Marble is terrible for standing. But she insisted on that venue because of the chandeliers. She never thinks about comfort, only about how things look. My hand froze in midair. "Relax, Mom." Kyle's voice chimed in. I could hear the clink of glass against glass. He was raiding the private minibar I had stocked with their favorite scotch. "You know how she is. Taylor is all about control. She picks the venue. She picks the food. She picks the music. It makes her feel important, like she's the boss of us or something." I stood there in the hallway, the blood draining from my face. I had chosen the Palmer House because it was my mother's dream venue. She had cut a picture of it out of a magazine 20 years ago. I had kept that clipping in my diary. "It is not just the control," my mother sighed. "It is the lack of soul. Did you see her face during the toast stone cold? She stood there like a statue. Everyone else was crying, feeling the emotion of the moment, and she was probably calculating the tax deduction on the cake." "She is rigid," Kyle laughed, a wet, sloppy sound. "That is why she is single. Mom, no guy wants to date a calculator. I asked her for a bridge loan for the crypto project earlier, strictly business. Guaranteed returns, and she looked at me like I was asking for a kidney. She has no vision. She thinks working a 9-to-5 job makes her superior." "It is not a 9-to-5, Kyle." My father's voice rumbled. It was deep, authoritative, the voice I had spent my whole life trying to impress. She works all the time. That is the problem. She has no life. She has no joy. She has money, though, Kyle said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, which is good for us, right? I waited. I waited for my father to correct him. I waited for him to say, "She works hard to take care of us." I waited for him to defend the daughter who had paid for his heart surgery last year. The daughter who had paid off the second mortgage he took out to cover Kyle's gambling debts. Instead, I heard the sound of a heavy body settling into a leather armchair. "That girl," my father said, and the tone of his voice was not one of affection, or even pity. It was pure, unadulterated contempt. "She is always calculating, always keeping score. You would think she was doing us a favor." He paused, and then he said the words that would burn themselves into my auditory cortex forever. "She has never given this family anything, not really, not anything that matters." The air in the hallway seemed to vanish. I couldn't breathe. My lungs were paralyzed. "What do you mean?" "Richard," my mother asked, though she didn't sound surprised. "I mean, look at her," my father continued, his voice rising with a sudden, drunken anger. "She throws money at us like she is paying off a debt. It is cold. It is impersonal. It is just an obligation. She thinks because she writes a check. She is a good daughter, no. A good daughter gives you warmth. A good daughter gives you grandchildren, proper ones. Not like that career she is married to. She has never given this family anything of value. She is just a cold fish." "Exactly," Kyle said, his voice slurring slightly. "But hey, don't worry. Dad, I am going to hit it big soon. This new venture is a sure thing. Once the coin launches, we will be rolling in it. We won't have to look at her sour face anymore. We won't have to beg for crumbs." "I hope so, son," my father said. "I am tired of walking on eggshells around her. Tired of her making me feel small just because she pays the bills." "Just give it a few months," Kyle said, chuckling. "But, until then, let her pay off the vacation villa first. Yeah, the final balloon payment is due next month, 50 grand. Let her handle that, and then we can cut the cord." "Right," my mother agreed. "We need that villa. It is the only place I can truly relax. She owes us that much, at least, for ruining the mood tonight with her dour face." "Cheers to that," my father said. I heard the clinking of glasses again, the sound of 3 people toasting to their own parasitism. I did not barge in. I did not kick the door open and scream that I had heard every word. I did not throw the receipt for $154,000 in their faces. Instead, a strange, terrifying calm washed over me. It was the same sensation I felt in the boardroom when a client told me their company was imploding. The panic vanished. The hurt vanished. In its place, a cold, hard logic took over. My father was right. I had been calculating, but my calculations had been wrong. I had been operating under the assumption that I was investing in a relationship. I thought I was buying love, or at least respect. I thought that if I solved enough of their problems, if I removed enough of their burdens, they would eventually see me. I thought I was the foundation of this family. But I wasn't the foundation, I was the resource. To them, I was not a person. I was in an oil well. I was a strip mine. I was a thing to be drilled, blasted, and excavated until I was empty, and then discarded. They didn't hate me because I was cold. They hated me because they needed me, and they resented the hand that fed them because it reminded them of their own hunger. "She has never given this family anything." The sentence replayed in my mind, looping like a broken record. It was an absolute statement, a factual claim, and in my line of work, when a claim is made, you either refute it or you accept it. If they believed I had given them nothing, then clearly, my contributions, the millions of dollars, the years of stress, the sacrificed dreams held zero value to them. And if something has zero value, you stop producing it. I looked at my hand. It was trembling. Just slightly. I made a fist, tightening my fingers until the nails dug into my palm, the sharp pain grounding me. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the hotel corridor dust and lemon polish. I took out my phone. The screen glowed in the dim light. I saw the notifications messages from my assistant, emails from clients. I saw the family group chat, where earlier that day I had posted a photo of the venue with the caption, "Can't wait to celebrate you both." I swiped the notification away. I turned my back on the mahogany door. I walked back down the hallway, my heels making no sound on the thick carpet. I moved like a ghost. I was invisible to them inside the room. And now, I would be invisible to them in reality. I reached the lobby, the valet captain. A young man named David saw me coming and jogged over, holding a key fob. It was the key to the S-Class Mercedes sedan I had driven here. It was technically my car, bought in my name, but my father drove it 90% of the time. He called it his car. He had driven it to the party. But because he had been drinking, the plan was for me to drive them all home. "Ms. Vallon," David said, smiling, "shall I bring the car around? The rest of your party is still upstairs." I looked at the key fob in his hand. The leather strap was worn where my father's thumb always rubbed it. "No," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow, metallic. "Leave it." David looked confused. "Ma'am, you want me to leave it in the garage?" "Yes," I said. "Park it in the long-term section. Put the keys in the hotel safe. Do not give them to anyone else." "Okay," David said, uncertainly. "And for you?" "Call me a taxi," I said. "A taxi." "But ma'am, we have the house car available. Or I could—" "A taxi," I repeated. "Yellow cab. Nothing fancy." 5 minutes later, I was sitting in the back of a beat-up Ford Crown Victoria that smelled of stale tobacco and pine air freshener. It was a far cry from the leather seats of the Mercedes or the plush interior of the Porsche. "Where to?" "Lady," the driver asked, eyeing me in the rearview mirror. I must have looked insane, a woman in a $4,000 couture jumpsuit sitting in a dirty cab alone at 1 o'clock in the morning. "The Loop," I said. 100 North Riverside." The driver pulled away from the curb. I didn't look back at the hotel. I didn't look up at the mezzanine windows. I sat in the darkness as the city lights blurred past the window. The Chicago River was a black ribbon below, reflecting the orange glow of the street lamps. "You have never given this family anything." The words were no longer a knife in my heart. They were a key that had just unlocked a cell door I hadn't realized I was locked behind. They wanted nothing, fine. I pulled my phone out again. I opened my banking app. I logged in with my biometric ID. The screen loaded, displaying the balances. Checking, savings, investment portfolio, and then the list of linked accounts, the accounts I managed, the accounts I fed. Richard and Cynthia Vallon, joint checking. Kyle Vallon, personal checking. Vallon Estate, mortgage servicing. Porsche Financial Services, lease agreement. Lake Geneva Villa, escrow account. I stared at the list. It looked like a tumor, a financial malignancy that had been growing in my life for a decade. The driver hit a pothole, jarring me. I didn't blink. "Just obligation," my father had said. I looked at the balance in my parents' joint account, $5,000. Money I had transferred yesterday to ensure they had walking around money for the weekend. I looked at Kyle's account, $800, also from me. I looked at the mortgage, automatic payment scheduled for the 1st of the month, 2 days from now. I closed my eyes for a second, letting the darkness of the cab envelop me. When I opened them, the tears I expected to come were absent. There was no sadness. There was only clarity. I was done being the daughter. I was done being the sister. I was done being the bank. Tonight, I was just the crisis manager, and I had finally identified the root cause of the crisis. It was time to liquidate the asset. "Driver," I said, my voice cutting through the hum of the tires, "can you turn the radio off? I have work to do." He clicked the radio off. Silence filled the cab. I arrived at my building 20 minutes later. The doorman, bewildered to see me getting out of a yellow taxi, rushed to open the door. I walked past him without a word, straight to the private elevator that led to the penthouse. I was going home, to my empty, cold, magnificent home, And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to fill the silence with their noise. I was going to fill it with consequences. My apartment was silent, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a clean room before surgery. I locked the door of my penthouse on the 45th floor, kicked off my Louboutins, and did not turn on the lights. The ambient glow of the Chicago skyline filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long skeletal shadows across the marble floor. I did not cry. I did not throw a vase against the wall. I did not pour myself a drink. Those were reactions for people who were surprised. And I was no longer surprised. I was efficient. I sat down at my desk, a slab of black granite that faced the city, and opened my laptop. The screen flickered to life, the blue light illuminating my face. I needed to see the data. In my line of work, you do not make decisions based on hearsay or overheard conversations in hotel hallways. You make decisions based on hard evidence. You audit the books. I opened a new spreadsheet. I named the file Liquidation. I logged into my primary banking portal, the master account from which all other sub-accounts were fed. I had set up this infrastructure 10 years ago, convinced that if I centralized the family finances, I could protect them. I could ensure bills were paid, savings were accrued, and disasters were averted. I had built a financial fortress around my parents and my brother. Now, I was going to calculate the cost of the bricks. I started with the medical expenses. I filtered the search results for medical and Richard Valen. The list populated instantly, scrolling down the screen like a digital waterfall. May 2016. Mercy Hospital, cardiac bypass surgery copays, and private recovery room upgrade. $42,000. I remembered that week. I had slept in the hospital chair for 4 nights, taking conference calls in the cafeteria, ensuring Dad had the best surgeon in the state. He had thanked the doctors. He had thanked God. He had never thanked me for the check that cleared the balance before he was even discharged. August 2018. Dental reconstruction for Cynthia Valen. $28,000. Mom had said her teeth were crumbling from stress. The stress of what? I wondered. The stress of deciding which brunch spot to visit. I typed the number into the spreadsheet. I moved to the Kyle tab. This was harder to look at. November 2019. Legal fees. DUI defense. $15,000. January 2020. Seed capital. Valen Vibes, DJ business. $25,000. March 2021. Lease down payment. Porsche Panamera. $12,000. Monthly car payments. 2021 to present. $43,200. The numbers were nauseating, not because of the amount, but because of the futility. I was looking at a ledger of waste. I had thrown gold bars into a black hole, hoping it would eventually fill up and become solid ground. I typed faster, my fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard. The rhythmic clicking was the only sound in the apartment. Valen estate maintenance. Country club dues. Grandchildren's private school tuition street. Jude's Academy. I paused at the tuition. $120,000 over 2 years. Kyle had told me he was handling half, but the bank records showed he hadn't contributed a single cent. I had paid the full amount, every semester. I had paid for the uniforms. I had paid for the tablet computers. I highlighted the column and hit the sum function. The figure appeared in bold at the bottom of the screen. $1,942,560. I stared at the number. Nearly $2 million. That was my retirement. That was a villa in the south of France. That was an early exit from the high-pressure world of crisis management. That was my freedom, and I had given it all away, month after month, year after year, to people who claimed I had given them nothing. But the audit was not finished. There was one loose end that had been nagging at me since Kyle made that comment in the hallway about the vacation villa and the big score. I logged into the third-party mortgage servicing portal for the Valen estate. My parents lived in a sprawling, 6-bedroom historic home in Lake Forest. It was their pride and joy, the symbol of their status. I had set up an automatic transfer of $8,000 a month to my father's personal checking account, labeled specifically for mortgage property tax and insurance escrow. I did this because my father insisted on paying the bill himself. He said it made him feel like the man of the house to write the check. I had indulged his ego. I navigated to the payment history on the bank portal. Last payment received February 2025. My blood ran cold. It was currently January 2026. They hadn't paid the mortgage in 11 months. I opened a new tab and went to the Cook County Treasurer's website. I searched the property index number for the estate. Status delinquent. Tax sale imminent. I felt a physical blow to my chest. I had sent them $88,000 in the last 11 months specifically for these bills. Where was the money? I went back to my parents' joint checking account history, the one I had access to but rarely checked, because I trusted them to pay the bills I funded. I scrolled through the outflows for the last year. The Ritz-Carlton, Maui, $14,000. Neiman Marcus, $6,000. Saks Fifth Avenue, $4,000. Cash withdrawal, casino, $5,000. Cash withdrawal, casino, $3,000. There it was, the autopsy of a betrayal. They had taken the mortgage money, the tax money, the insurance money, and they had eaten it. They had worn it. They had gambled it away. They had been living a lie, projecting an image of wealth and stability while the foundation of their actual home was rotting away beneath them. Then I saw the email. It was in a subfolder of my father's email account, which was linked to my recovery address. I had set it up years ago when he kept forgetting his passwords. I searched for bank and urgent. There was an email from the lender, dated 3 days ago. Subject notice of foreclosure sale. Final warning. I opened it. Dear Mr. Valen, this is a notification that the property located at 12 Oakwood Lane is scheduled for judicial sale on February 23, 2026. Due to default on the mortgage note and failure to pay property taxes, to stop the auction, the full reinstatement amount of $315,000 must be paid by cashier's check no later than February 20th. February 23rd. That was 3 weeks from Monday. I sat back in my chair, the leather creaking, the pieces of the puzzle slammed together with a deafening clarity. The party, the lavish $150,000 anniversary party, it wasn't a celebration, it was a stage. They knew the house was gone. They knew they needed over $300,000 immediately to save it. They knew no bank would lend them money. So, they threw a party. They buttered me up or tried to. They invited all their wealthy friends to maintain the illusion of prosperity, so I wouldn't suspect they were broke. Kyle's comment about a new opportunity and seed capital wasn't about a crypto startup. It was the preamble to the question. They were going to wait until I was soft, until I was basking in the glow of being the good daughter who threw the perfect party. Then, probably tomorrow or Sunday brunch. My father would sit me down with a grave face. He would say there was a clerical error with the bank, or a temporary liquidity issue, and he needed a short-term loan of $300,000. They were going to use me to bail them out of a disaster they had created with the money I had already given them. And the worst part? If I hadn't heard them in the hallway, if I hadn't heard my father say I gave them nothing, I probably would have done it. I would have sighed, lectured them about budgeting, and then I would write the check, because that is what I did. I fixed things. But I wasn't fixing this. I looked at the date on the screen. The auction was 3 weeks away. They were counting on me to be their safety net. They were sleeping soundly in their hotel beds right now, confident that Taylor, the ATM, would dispense the cash when they punched in the right emotional code. I closed the spreadsheet. I didn't save it. I didn't need to. The numbers were burned into my retinas. I stood up and walked to the window. The city below was a grid of lights, indifferent and beautiful. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't anger anymore. It was light. The heavy chain of obligation that had dragged behind me for a decade had just snapped. I was not going to warn them. I was not going to scream at them. I was not going to intervene. I was going to let gravity do its work. I returned to my desk and opened my work email. It was 3 in the morning, but I knew the human resources system would log the timestamp immediately. I composed a new email. To Sarah Jenkins, VP of Human Resources, CC Marcus Thorne, CEO. Subject immediate leave of absence. Dear Sarah, effective immediately, I am invoking my right to take a 1-month unpaid leave of absence for health reasons, specifically severe burnout, as per my contract. Clause 14, Section B. I am entitled to this time off, given my 12 years of uninterrupted service and accrued leave balance. I have delegated my current case files to the senior associates. My phone will be off, and I will be unreachable by email. I will return on March 1st. Regards. Taylor Valen. I had never taken a sick day. I had never taken a vacation longer than a weekend. I had accrued 6 months of leave. They couldn't deny me. I hit send. The whoosh sound of the email departing was the most satisfying sound I had heard in years. I was removing myself from the equation. I was taking the player off the board. When the bank came for the house, when the credit cards declined, when the reality of their choices came crashing down like a tidal wave, I would not be there to build a dam. I was going to be gone. I stood up and walked to my bedroom. I pulled my suitcase from the top shelf of the closet. It was a Rimowa aluminum case, dented from 100 business trips, usually. I pack it with suits and blazers. Tonight, I packed cashmere sweaters. I packed my leggings. I packed the hiking boots I had bought 5 years ago and never worn. I packed books I had been meaning to read. I moved to the bathroom and swept my toiletries into a bag. No makeup, no hair straightener, just the essentials. I was ready. But there was one final step, the execution, the cancel button. I sat on the edge of my bed with my phone. The banking app was still open. Scheduled transfers. Richard Valen. Monthly stipend cancel. Confirm yes. Valen Estate. Mortgage/tax fund cancel. Confirm yes. Kyle Valen. Allowance cancel. Confirm yes. Porsche lease. Auto pay cancel. Confirm yes. Say, Jude's Academy. Tuition cancel. Confirm yes. I went down the list. One by one. It was surgical. It was rhythmic. Tap, cancel, confirm, tap, cancel, confirm. With every confirmation, I felt a layer of skin shedding. The dutiful daughter was dying, pixel by pixel. Finally, I reached the credit cards. I held the primary account holder status on all of them. I selected the freeze card option for every authorized user card issued to my parents and Kyle. Card ending in 4599. Cynthia Frozen. Card ending in 3211. Richard Frozen. Card ending in 8800. Kyle Frozen. Access denied, I whispered to the empty room. It was done. The stream had run dry. The dam was closed. I looked at the time. 4:15 in the morning. The sun would be rising over the lake in 2 hours. By the time it did, I would be on the road. I zipped up the suitcase. The sound was sharp, definitive. I grabbed my coat. I did not look back at the apartment. It was just a place I slept. It wasn't home. I took the elevator down to the garage, my personal car, a vintage Land Rover Defender that I had restored as a hobby, but rarely drove because it wasn't corporate enough. Was waiting under a dust cover. I pulled the cover off, revealing the matte green paint. It looked tough. It looked ready for a fight. I threw my suitcase in the back. I climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine roared to life, a guttural, mechanical growl that vibrated through the steering wheel and into my hands. I drove out of the garage, the tires squealing slightly on the concrete. The city was asleep. The streets were empty. I merged onto the highway, heading west. I wasn't going to the office. I wasn't going to the family brunch. I was going to Big Sur. I was going to a glass house on a cliff edge that I had rented under a shell company name an hour ago. I was going to watch the ocean. And from a distance, I was going to watch my former life burn to the ground. The digital clock on my laptop screen read 4 o'clock in the morning. The city outside was dead quiet. the kind of heavy silence that usually precedes a storm. My finger hovered over the trackpad. I had already frozen the credit cards. But that was just the surface. That was just stopping the bleeding. Now, I was about to perform the amputation. I pulled up the dashboard for the Vallon Estate Utilities. This was a separate system, one I logged into perhaps once a year to update a card number. The account holder name was Richard Valen, but the billing address and the payment source were mine. I clicked on the electricity tab. The monthly average was $600. Thanks to my mother's insistence on keeping the air conditioning at 68 degrees in the summer and the heating at 75 in the winter. Even in rooms nobody used. I found the Stop Service button. A warning box popped up. Are you sure you want to disconnect service at 12 Oakwood Lane? This will result in a total loss of power within 24 hours. I thought about the wine cellar in the basement, stocked with vintage bottles that required precise temperature control. I thought about the security system that relied on the main power grid. I thought about my mother's heated towel rack. Yes, I said aloud. I clicked confirm. Next was the water, then the gas, then the high-speed fiber optic internet package that Kyle used to stream movies in his bedroom while claiming he was researching market trends. Service disconnection scheduled. I moved on to the lifestyle accounts, the Oak Brook Country Club. My father had been a member for 30 years, but for the last 10. I had been the one paying the $25,000 annual dues. It was his primary social circle. It was where he went to feel important. I navigated to the membership portal. I selected Terminate Membership. The site prompted me to call a representative, but there was a small, legally mandated link at the bottom for immediate cancellation via online form. I filled it out. Reason for leaving, I typed, financial insolvency of members. It was petty, it was professional, it was perfect. Then came the car insurance. Kyle was driving a high-performance vehicle on the crowded streets of Chicago. I paid $300 a month to insure him. If I canceled this, and the leasing company found out, they would void his contract immediately. I canceled it effective at midnight tonight. Now for the Porsche itself. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the emergency asset recovery team of the leasing agency. It was an automated line at this hour. But I knew the codes to reach the dispatch operator. I had used them before for clients who needed to hide assets during a divorce. This time, I was the whistleblower. Apex Leasing, emergency line. A groggy voice answered. This is Taylor Valen, I said, my voice crisp. I am the leaseholder for a 2024 Porsche Panamera, license plate Victor Alpha Lima 99. The vehicle is currently in the possession of an unauthorized driver who is no longer covered by my insurance policy. Okay, Ms. Valen, the operator said, typing in the background. You want to report it stolen? No, I said. I want to surrender the vehicle. Voluntary repossession. I am telling you where it is, and I want it picked up immediately. It is parked at the Palmer House Hilton parking garage, or possibly at the residence at 12 Oakwood Lane. The driver does not have the authority to keep it. We can have a tow truck out there by 8 o'clock this morning, the operator said. If it is voluntary, you will be liable for the early termination fees. Bill me, I said. Just get the car. I hung up, the image of Kyle walking out to the driveway in his silk pajamas, only to find an empty spot where his ego used to be, brought a ghost of a smile to my lips. Now came the final blow, the explanation. I opened the file manager on my phone. During the party, before the guests arrived, I had set up a small, inconspicuous nanny cam on the bookshelf in the VIP suite. I had told myself it was to keep an eye on the expensive gifts and envelopes of cash that guests would leave, to ensure none of the catering staff got sticky fingers. It was a habit from my crisis management job, always secure the perimeter. I hadn't expected to catch my own execution on tape. I pulled up the footage. The audio was crystal clear. She has never given this family anything. My father's voice sneered from the speaker. No guy wants to date a calculator. Kyle laughed. She owes us that much, my mother added. I trimmed the clip. I didn't need the whole hour. Just those 2 minutes. The 2 minutes where they stripped me of my humanity and reduced me to a checkbook. I opened the family group chat. It was named Valen Family Love, a title my mother had chosen. The last message was from me. Hours ago, can't wait to see you all. I uploaded the audio file. I typed a single caption underneath it. According to Dad, I have never given this family anything, so, from now on, I will do exactly that. I hit send. The message bubble turned blue, delivered. They were all asleep. They wouldn't see it until they woke up in their plush hotel beds, likely with hangovers, reaching for their phones to check their social media likes. I didn't wait for the fallout. I went to my phone's settings. I didn't block them, that would be too easy, and frankly, legally unwise. I needed a record of their reaction for the restraining order I might need later. I created a specific filter rule. All calls, texts, and voicemails from Dad, Mom, and Kyle were set to bypass my inbox, bypass my notifications, and go straight into a hidden, password-protected folder I named Harassment Evidence. My phone would not ring, my screen would not light up. They would be screaming into the void, and I would be listening to the silence. It was now 5:30 in the morning. The sky to the east was turning a bruised purple, the sun struggling to break through the winter smog. I grabbed the handle of my Rimowa suitcase. I took one last look at my apartment. It was a beautiful, sterile glass box. I left the keys on the kitchen counter along with a note for the cleaning lady, paying her for the next 6 months and telling her to keep the plants alive. I took the elevator down to the garage. The Land Rover Defender sat there, looking like a beast waiting to be unleashed. I threw my bag in the back, climbed into the driver's seat, and turned the key. The engine rumbled, a deep, satisfying sound that vibrated through the soles of my boots. I pulled out of the garage and onto the empty streets of Chicago. The city was just waking up. Delivery trucks were idling at corners. Steam was rising from the manhole covers. I merged onto the outbound highway, heading west. As the skyline of Chicago, the city where I had built my career, the city where I had lost myself, shrank in my rearview mirror. I waited for the panic to set in. I waited for the guilt. I waited for the urge to turn around and fix it, to beg for forgiveness, to write one more check. But it didn't come. Instead, as I watched the speedometer climb to 70 miles per hour, I felt something foreign expanding in my chest. It felt like oxygen. It felt like the first breath after being held underwater for 3 decades. My phone sat on the passenger seat, face down. I knew that in a few hours, it would be receiving a barrage of digital hate. I knew my world was about to explode. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one standing at ground zero. I was the one driving away from the blast zone. I rolled down the window, letting the freezing cold wind whip against my face. It stung, but it felt real. "Goodbye," I whispered to the wind. I pressed my foot down on the accelerator, and Taylor Valen, the ATM, the fixer, the dutiful daughter, vanished into the morning mist. I was 2,000 miles away, standing on the edge of a redwood deck that cantilevered over the Pacific Ocean, when the bomb I had planted finally detonated. The drive had been a blur of asphalt and caffeine, a 3-day exorcism where I left the ghost of my former life scattered across the interstate lines of Nebraska and Wyoming. I had arrived in Big Sur late last night, navigating the winding cliffs of Highway 1 in the pitch black, the Land Rover climbing higher and higher until the rest of the world disappeared into the fog below. Now, it was morning. The air here tasted different. It didn't smell of exhaust and anxiety. It tasted of salt, pine needles, and cold indifference. I sat on a teak chair, a ceramic mug of oolong tea warming my hands, and watched the waves crash against the rocks 500 feet below. I picked up my phone. It was the first time I had touched it since I crossed the state line. I opened the hidden folder labeled Harassment Evidence. The number of unread notifications was staggering. 472 messages, 53 missed calls, 28 voicemails. I took a sip of tea, the steam curling around my face, and began to scroll. It was like reading a script I had written myself. The chaos had started, predictably, around 11 o'clock the previous morning. just as checkout time approached at the Palmer house. The first wave of messages came from Kyle. Dude, where's the car? I am in the garage. Spot 4B. It is empty. Taylor, stop playing games. I have a lunch meeting. Bring the keys back. Did you take it? This is not funny. The valet said a tow truck came. Pick up the phone. You reported it stolen. Are you insane? I could visualize the scene perfectly. Kyle, standing in the dimly lit concrete garage, his eyes bloodshot from the open bar, wearing yesterday's suit. He would be sweating, not just from the hangover, but from the dawning realization that his magic carpet had been pulled out from under him. The leasing agent would have been polite but firm. Possession recovered due to breach of contract. Kyle would have had to take an Uber home, likely putting the $50 fare on a credit card he didn't realize was already dead. I scrolled down. The next batch was from my mother. Her messages were time-stamped 30 minutes later. Taylor, there is a mistake with the card. I am at the bistro. They declined the visa. I tried Amex. Declined. Call the bank immediately. It is embarrassing. The manager is looking at us. Taylor, pick up. We had to pay cash. Dad is furious. He had to use the emergency bills from his wallet. What is going on? I closed my eyes and let the ocean breeze hit my face. I could see Cynthia Vallon. Her face perfectly powdered, her smile tight and brittle, crumbling as the young server handed the black card back to her. I am sorry, ma'am. The issuer has put a hold on this account. The whispers from the neighboring tables. The sudden, terrifying loss of the only currency she understood status. Then, the tone of the messages shifted. They had listened to the audio file. They had seen the caption. How dare you? My father wrote, after everything we did for you, raising you, feeding you, you are ungrateful. You are spiteful. This is a misunderstanding. We were venting. You know how stress talks. Come back and we can discuss this like adults. And then, the threats. I am calling the police. You stole our money. You are cutting off your own family. You will rot in hell for this. Mom is having palpitations. If she has a stroke, it is on your hands. I didn't feel a spike of adrenaline. I didn't feel guilty. I felt the cool detachment of a scientist observing bacteria in a petri dish. They were reacting exactly as a parasite does when the host body suddenly develops an immune system. They were flailing. I set the phone down and picked up my book. I read 10 pages of a novel about a woman who walks across a desert. I drank my tea. I watched a hawk circle the thermal currents above the water. In my mind, I switched channels to the scene playing out at Apex Meridian back in Chicago. According to a text from my assistant, Sarah, who was the only person I had kept on my allowed list, Kyle had shown up at the headquarters at 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon. He had marched into the marble lobby of the Apex building, demanding to see me. He probably thought he could bully me back into submission, just like he used to do when we were kids, and he would twist my arm until I gave him my allowance. I am her brother, he screamed at the receptionist. She is stealing from us. Get her down here. But I wasn't there, and unlike our childhood home, Apex Meridian was a fortress. I had briefed the head of security, a former Navy SEAL named Marcus, before I left. I had told him that an estranged family member might attempt to cause a disturbance. I had provided a photo. Sarah's text was brief and professional, Esther. Vallon attempted to breach the elevators. Security intercepted him. He became belligerent and made threats against the firm. He was escorted off the premises and informed that if he returns, he will be arrested for trespassing. We have the incident on CCTV if you need it for legal purposes. I typed back, save the footage. Thank you. Sarah. Kyle had been physically thrown out of the building. The humiliation would be eating him alive. He had always relied on the Valen name, on the implication of power. But without my money backing it up, the Valen name was just 5 letters on a cheap suit. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long golden shadows across the deck. I decided to listen to one voicemail, just one, to gauge the temperature of the room. I selected a message from my father, time-stamped at 8 o'clock last night. I held the phone to my ear, Taylor. His voice came through. It wasn't the angry boom of the banquet toast. It was the smooth, cultivated baritone he used when he was trying to close a deal or borrow money from a neighbor. Taylor, honey, look, things got heated. We all said things we didn't mean. You know how Kyle gets. And your mother? She is just tired. He paused, waiting for a response that wouldn't come. But this reaction is extreme. Don't you think cutting the cards? Taking the car? You are acting like a child throwing a tantrum. We are your family. We love you. We are willing to forgive this outburst. Just come home. Turn the utilities back on, the house is freezing. Taylor, it is 50 degrees here, and we can sit down and work out a budget. I know you are stressed at work. We can fix this. The gaslighting was so thick, I could almost scrape it off the screen. We are willing to forgive you, as if I were the one who had sinned. As if funding their lifestyle for a decade was an offense I needed to apologize for. And then, the kicker. The house is freezing. I had forgotten about the utilities. I checked the timeline. I had issued the disconnect order at 4 a.m. on Saturday. It was now Monday evening. The power would have been cut 24 hours ago. The water would have been shut off this morning. They were sitting in the cavernous, drafty estate, surrounded by expensive furniture they didn't own. In the dark, they couldn't flush the toilets. They couldn't charge their phones unless they sat in my father's car assuming it had gas, which it probably didn't, since I wasn't there to fill it. I laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was a genuine, bubbling sound that rose from my diaphragm and startled a seagull perched on the railing. I am not stressed, Dad, I said to the recorded voice, though he couldn't hear me. I am finally retired. I saved the voicemail to the evidence folder. Exhibit A, attempted manipulation. I didn't reply. To reply would be to give them oxygen. It would be to acknowledge that their discomfort mattered to me. Silence was the only weapon they couldn't parry. I went inside the glass house. It was minimalist, sparse, and beautiful. I opened my laptop and initiated a secure video call. The face that appeared on the screen was sharp, angular, and framed by expensive spectacles. Elias Thorne. He was the best asset protection attorney in Chicago. We had worked together on several crisis cases for Apex. He was a shark who ate other sharks for breakfast. Taylor, Elias said, his voice crisp, I got your encrypted file. I have reviewed the transfers, the property deeds, and the communication logs you sent. And I asked, leaning back in my chair. And it is a mess, he said, but it is a mess we can win. They have no legal claim to your assets. The money you gave them was, legally speaking, a series of gifts. There were no written contracts implying a perpetual duty of care. You have every right to stop the flow. They are threatening to sue for support, I said. Kyle sent a text about elder abuse laws. Elias snorted. Kyle thinks watching an episode of Law and Order makes him a jurist. Elder abuse requires proof that you were the designated caretaker and that your negligence caused physical harm. You were not their caretaker. You were their banker, and you resigned. However, he paused, looking at a document on his desk. However what? They are desperate, Elias said. And desperate people do stupid things. I ran a credit check on your father this morning. He has applied for 3 emergency payday loans in the last 12 hours. They were all denied. The foreclosure auction is public record now. The sharks are circling. They are going to come at you with everything they have. They are going to try to claim you are mentally unstable to get control of your accounts again. I saw the draft of a petition they are trying to file for an emergency conservatorship. I felt a cold spike in my stomach. A conservatorship. It was the nuclear option. They wanted to declare me incompetent so they could legally seize my money and force me to pay their bills. Can they do that? I asked. Not with me representing you, Elias said, a predatory grin spreading across his face. But we need to be proactive. I need you to authorize me to file a countersuit. I want to file for a declaratory judgment that you owe them nothing, and I want to file restraining orders based on the harassment. Do it, I said. But Elias, yes. I want to make sure the foreclosure proceeds. I don't want them to find a loophole to stop the auction. That house is the symbol of everything they pretended to be. It needs to go. The bank is moving forward, Elias assured me. Unless they come up with $315,000 by the 20th, the hammer falls, and considering your father currently has, Elias tapped his keyboard, $4.12 in his available balance. I don't think that is happening. Good, I said. One more thing, Elias said, his expression softening slightly. Are you okay? You are alone out there. I looked out the window. The sun had set, and the ocean was a vast, breathing darkness. The stars were coming out, sharp and clear, unpolluted by the city lights. I am not alone, Elias, I said. I am with the only person who has ever actually looked out for me. Who is that? He asked. Me, I said. I closed the laptop. The connection severed. I walked to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. It was stocked with fresh vegetables, fruit, and a bottle of white wine I had bought for myself. I made a salad. I poured a glass of wine. I ate dinner in silence. No complaints about the cooking, no passive-aggressive comments about my weight or my job, no demands for money. The silence was heavy. Yes, but it was the heaviness of a gold bar, not a shackle. I went to bed early. As I drifted off, I imagined my parents in their dark, cold mansion, wrapped in their fur coats, huddled around a candle, waiting for a savior who had finally decided to save herself. Tomorrow, the war would escalate. Tomorrow, the rumors will start. But tonight, I slept, and for the first time in 10 years, I didn't dream of drowning. The silence of the coastline was deceptive. While I sat in my glass sanctuary watching the Pacific Ocean churn against the cliffs, a digital war was being waged against my character. I was 2,000 miles away from the blast zone, but the fallout was landing on my screen. Pixel by Toxic Pixel. It began on Wednesday, 3 days after I had vanished. The initial panic of the Vallon family had mutated into something far more calculated and sinister. When their pleas for money went unanswered and their threats of police intervention hit the wall of my adult autonomy, they switched tactics. If they could not control me, they would destroy the version of me that existed in the minds of others. I opened my laptop to monitor the situation. In my line of work, we call this threat assessment. My cousin, a well-meaning but gossip-prone woman named Bethany, had sent me a screenshot from Facebook. It was a post from my mother, Cynthia. Please pray for our daughter Taylor. The post read, accompanied by a photo of me from high school, looking vulnerable. She has suffered a severe mental break. We believe she has fallen under the influence of a dangerous group that isolates members from their families. She is not herself, if you see her. Please do not give her money. She is not in her right mind. The comments were a slurry of sympathy and shock. So sad. One neighbor wrote, she always seemed so work-obsessed. I guess she finally snapped. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. They were painting a narrative of insanity. It was a strategic move. If I was crazy, then my decision to cut them off wasn't a rational response to abuse. It was a symptom of illness. If I was crazy, they were the victims. But the campaign didn't stop at social media. They went for the throat. They went for my career. At 10 o'clock in the morning, my secure line rang. The caller ID displayed a name that made my stomach tighten. Marcus Thorne. Marcus was the CEO of Apex Meridian. He was my mentor. The man who had taught me that emotions are liabilities in a crisis. He was the only father figure I respected. I answered the call, my voice steady. Good morning, Marcus. Taylor, Marcus said. His voice was unreadable, deep and gravelly. I am going to ask you a question, and I want a direct answer. Are you currently in a safe location? I am, I said. I am in California. I am taking the leave of absence we discussed. Good, Marcus said, because I just got off the phone with Mr. Richard Vallon. My hand tightened around the phone. My father had called the CEO of a billion-dollar firm. The audacity was breathtaking. I apologize, Marcus, I said, keeping the tremor out of my voice. I hope he didn't waste too much of your time. He was colorful, Marcus said dryly. He informed me that you are in the grips of a severe narcotics addiction. He claimed that you have been embezzling funds from Apex Meridian to support this habit, and that your sudden disappearance is actually a flight from the law. He suggested that I freeze your payroll and transfer any outstanding bonuses to a family trust account he controls, so they can administer care for you. I closed my eyes. It was so clumsy, yet so vicious. My father was trying to get me fired. He was willing to burn my professional reputation to the ground just to get his hands on my severance package. Marcus, I said, I can send you my bank records. I can submit to a drug test right now at a lab of your choosing. These are lies. They are desperate because I stopped paying their mortgage. Taylor, stop, Marcus interrupted. I didn't call to interrogate you. I called to warn you. I looked at the forensic audit of your accounts before you left. You are the most fiscally responsible director I have, and you gave me a written notice of leave citing burnout, which I approved. I know a shakedown when I hear one. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I told your father, Marcus continued, a hint of steel entering his tone, that if he ever contacts me or any employee of Apex Meridian again, I will have our legal department file a suit for defamation and tortious interference so fast his head will spin. I also told him that your employment status is none of his business. Thank you, Marcus, I whispered. I appreciate that more than I can say. Take your month, Taylor, he said. Get your head right, and when you come back, bring that killer instinct. You are going to need it. He hung up. I sat there, staring at the phone. My father had tried to kill my career. He had tried to cut off my income source so I would be forced to crawl back to him. It was an act of war. But the lowest blow was yet to come. An hour later, a new file appeared in the harassment evidence folder. It was a video message from Kyle. I hesitated. I knew I shouldn't watch it. I knew it was bait. But my nieces and nephew were involved. I clicked play. The video was shaky. Filmed in the living room of the Vallon estate. The lighting was dim because the power was cut. I realized with a jolt. They were filming by the light of a window. Kyle was behind the camera. In the frame were Leo and Mia, my brother's children. They looked unkempt. Leo was wearing a dirty t-shirt. Mia's hair was unbrushed. Go ahead, Kyle's voice hissed from behind the camera. Tell Auntie Taylor what the headmaster said. Leo looked at the camera. His big eyes filled with tears. He looked terrified. Not of me, but of the situation. Auntie Tay, he sniffled. We got sent home today. Mr. Henderson said nobody paid for school. He said we can't go back. Tell her what else, Kyle prompted aggressively. Daddy says you hate us, Mia chimed in, her voice small and trembling. Daddy says you want us to be stupid and poor. Why won't you help us? Auntie Tay, are we bad? The video ended abruptly. I slammed the laptop shut. I stood up and paced the length of the glass house, my breathing coming in short, sharp gasps. It was vile. It was monstrous. Kyle was using his own children as human shields. He was traumatizing them, telling them I hated them, just to squeeze money out of me. He knew the tuition was the one thing I had never compromised on. My instinct was to call him, to scream, to transfer the money instantly just to stop those tears. That is what he wants, a cold voice in my head whispered. If you send money to Kyle, he will keep it. He won't pay the school. He will buy booze and steaks, and the kids will still be kicked out next month. I had to be smarter. I had to have surgery. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Saint, Jude's Academy. Bursar's office. This is Mrs. Higgins, a pleasant voice answered. Mrs. Higgins, this is Taylor Vallon. I am calling regarding the accounts for Leo and Mia Vallon. Oh, Ms. Vallon, the woman's voice dropped. I am so sorry. We had to send them home this morning. We haven't received the spring semester payment. And your brother, well, he caused quite a scene in the front office. He insisted you would be here with a check. I apologize for the disruption, I said, my voice icy calm. I am going to pay the balance right now, for the entire year, but I have conditions. Of course, Ms. Vallon, We just want the children back in class. Condition 1, I said. You are to process this payment immediately so they can return tomorrow. Condition 2. You are not to tell my brother that I paid it. You tell him that an anonymous donor covered it, or that there was a scholarship fund, anything but my name. If he knows I paid, he will pull them out and use them as leverage again. Do you understand? I think I understand. Mrs. Higgins said, We can list it as an anonymous contribution. Good, I said. And condition 3. No cash refunds. If Kyle tries to withdraw them to get the tuition money back, the money reverts to the school's general fund. It never goes to him. Understood, she said. I gave her my credit card number, a secret card from a bank my family didn't know about. Within seconds, $12,000 was gone. I hung up. I felt a mixture of relief and nausea. I had saved the kids, but I knew Kyle would spin this. He would tell them he fixed it. He would be the hero. It didn't matter. They were in school. They were safe. I was just starting to regulate my breathing when my laptop chimed again. A secure video request from Elias Thorne. I accepted. Elias looked grim. He wasn't sitting in his office. He was in a conference room. Papers spread out everywhere. Taylor, he said, skipping the pleasantries. We have a problem. A big one. Did they contest the foreclosure? I asked. No, Elias said. Worse. I just got a heads up from a clerk at the probate court. Your parents just filed an emergency ex parte petition. English, Elias, I snapped. They are filing for an emergency conservatorship over your person and your estate, Elias said. They are using the text messages, the sudden disappearance, and this is the kicker: witness affidavits from friends claiming you have been exhibiting paranoid and delusional behavior. I stared at him. The room seemed to tilt. Conservatorship, I repeated, like they want to control me. They are claiming you have suffered a psychotic break, Elias explained rapidly. They are asking the court to appoint your father as the temporary conservator of your finances to protect your assets from being squandered during your mental health crisis. If the judge grants this, they can legally freeze your accounts. They can access your funds to pay themselves. They can even force you into a medical facility. They are trying to lock me up, I whispered. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They didn't just want my money. They wanted to enslave me. They wanted to strip me of my rights, my voice, and my freedom, just so they could keep living in a house they couldn't afford. This wasn't just greed anymore. This was predation. They are arguing that your decision to cut off life-sustaining utilities to your elderly parents is proof of your mental instability, Elias continued. They are twisting your self-defense into an act of insanity. I felt the tears I had been holding back evaporate. The heat in my chest wasn't sadness. It was a white-hot supernova of rage. I had been gentle. I had just walked away. I had left them with the clothes on their backs and the cars in the driveway. And this was how they repaid me, by trying to put a collar around my neck. Taylor, Elias asked, are you there? I am here, I said. My voice is different now. It was deeper, harder. It sounded like the ocean crashing against the rocks. We need to fight this, Elias said. I need you to come back to Chicago. We need to appear in court. No, I said. Taylor, if you don't appear... I didn't say I wouldn't fight. I cut him off. I said I'm not coming back to play their game on their turf. We are going to bury them. Elias, but we are going to do it my way. What do you want me to do? I want you to hire a forensic psychiatrist, I commanded. The best one in California. I will submit a full evaluation tomorrow morning. I want a signed affidavit of sanity. I want a drug test. Hair follicle, urine, blood, everything. Okay, Elias said, typing furiously. That handles the medical side. Then, I continued, my mind racing, I want you to subpoena their financial records, not just the ones I managed, everything, the credit cards they hid, the gambling debts. I want to prove to the judge that their motivation isn't concern for my health. It is a desperate need for liquidity. Show the court the foreclosure notice. Show the court that they only filed for conservatorship after the bank called. Motivation implies intent. Elias nodded. That is good. We paint them as financial predators. And Elias? Yes. Get the unedited footage from the Apex lobby, I said. The one where Kyle is screaming and threatening people, and get the recording of my father calling Marcus Thorne. We are going to countersue for abuse of process, defamation, and conspiracy to commit fraud. This is going to get ugly. Taylor, Elias warned, if we go down this road, there is no coming back. You are declaring war on your parents. I looked out at the dark horizon. I remembered the little girl who used to wait by the window for her father to come home, hoping he would bring her a candy bar, only to be ignored because she wasn't the golden son. I remembered the woman who had signed check after check, hoping to buy a sliver of love. That woman was dead. They had killed her. They declared war first. Elias, I said. They mistook my silence for weakness. They are about to find out that I am not the damsel in distress. I am the one who signs the checks, and I am closing the account. I will file the motions in the morning, Elias said. Get some sleep. You have a psych eval at 9. I won't need sleep, I said. I have adrenaline. I ended the call. I stood in the center of the glass house. I was trembling, but not from fear. I was trembling with the sheer, terrifying power of clarity. They wanted to prove I was crazy. I would show them crazy. I would show them the kind of crazy that meticulously dismantled their lives with the precision of a surgeon. I opened a new spreadsheet. I named it the counteroffensive. The smear campaign was their best shot. They had fired it, and they had missed. Now, it was my turn to return fire. And I wasn't aiming to wound. I was aiming to end it. The second week of my exile passed in a blur of legal maneuvers and strategic silence, while the Pacific Ocean crashed rhythmically against the cliffs below my rental. A different kind of storm was brewing in the courthouses of Cook County. The date of the foreclosure auction was inching closer, now just 10 days away. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the knock came. I was in the kitchen, slicing a lemon for my tea, when I saw the reflection of a police cruiser in the glass panel of the front door. 2 uniformed officers from the Monterey County Sheriff's Department were standing on my porch. My heart hammered against my ribs for a split second, a primal, childhood fear of authority. But then, the training kicked in. I was Taylor Vallon. I had done nothing wrong. I wiped my hands on a towel, smoothed my cashmere sweater, and opened the door. Good afternoon, officers, I said, my voice calm and inviting. Can I help you? The older officer, a man with a graying mustache and a name tag that read Deputy Miller, looked surprised. He was likely expecting a woman in the throes of a psychotic break, disheveled and raving, based on the report he had been given. Instead, he found a woman who looked like she was about to host a board meeting. Ma'am, are you Taylor Vallon? He asked, his hand resting casually near his belt. I am, I smiled. Is there a problem? We received a call from a Mr. Richard Vallon in Chicago, Deputy Miller said, consulting his notepad. He stated that you are a missing person, possibly suicidal, and potentially being held against your will by a cult. He requested a wellness check. I stepped back and opened the door wider. Please, come in. It is windy out there. They hesitated, then stepped into the foyer. I led them to the living room, where the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the ocean. My laptop was open on the coffee table, displaying a spreadsheet. A stack of books sat neatly on the side table. The room smelled of lemon and sandalwood. As you can see, Deputy, I said, gesturing to the view, I am not missing, I am on vacation, and I am certainly not in a cult, unless you count the cult of corporate burnout recovery. I walked to the kitchen counter and picked up a file folder I had prepared for exactly this moment. I handed it to him. This contains a copy of my lease agreement for this property, signed 2 weeks ago, I explained as he flipped through the pages. A copy of my leave of absence approval from my employer, Apex Meridian, and a copy of a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation I voluntarily underwent 3 days ago in San Jose, certifying that I am of sound mind and not a danger to myself or others. Deputy Miller looked at the documents. He looked at me. He looked at his partner, who shrugged. This looks very thorough. Miss Vallon, Miller said. I am a crisis manager by trade, I said softly. I anticipate scenarios. My family is going through a difficult financial transition, and they are not handling my refusal to fund them very well. I am afraid they are using law enforcement to harass me. Miller's face hardened. Police officers did not like being used as pawns in domestic disputes. So you are saying the report was false? I am saying that my father is desperate, I corrected gently. And desperate people lie. I am safe. I am healthy. I just want to be left alone. Do you want to file a report for false reporting? The younger officer asked. Not today, I said. Just update your logs. Mark me as located and safe. And please, if they call again, tell them that harassment is a crime. We will do that, ma'am, Miller said, closing his notebook. Sorry to disturb your afternoon. Nice place you have here. Thank you, officers. Would you like some coffee for the road? I just brewed a fresh pot. We are good, ma'am. You take care. As they drove away, I didn't feel relief. I felt vindication. My family had played their ace card, the police, and I had trumped it with a file folder and a smile. I immediately called Elias. The wellness check just happened, I told him. The police are leaving. They are marking the report as unfounded. Perfect, Elias said. That is the final nail in the coffin for their conservatorship petition. I am filing the motion to dismiss right now. I am attaching the police report as Exhibit D. We are arguing that the petition was filed in bad faith to exert financial control. And the foreclosure, I asked. Still on schedule, Elias confirmed. February 23rd, 10 a.m., courtroom 4. Do they know? We have no indication that they do, Elias said. The bank sends notifications by certified mail to the property address, if your parents are true to form. They are probably throwing the letters in a drawer, assuming you will deal with it eventually. They don't realize that eventually has run out. Good, I said. Keep it that way. Then I pitched him the curveball. Elias, I need you to leak something for me. Leak what? I want you to call their family attorney, that guy, Henderson, who they haven't paid in 6 months. Tell him, off the record, that I'm cracking. Tell him that the pressure is getting to me and that I am planning to fly back to Chicago this Sunday to make things right. You want to give them hope? Elias asked, confused. Why? Because if they think I'm coming back on Sunday to save them, I said, my voice cold, they won't scramble to find other money. They will stop looking for loans. They will sit back, relax, and wait for the golden goose to waddle home. They will be complacent. And then Monday morning hits. Elias realized. The auction. Exactly, I said. I want them to walk into that week thinking they have won. I want the fall to be absolute. You are terrifying, Taylor, Elias said. There was admiration in his voice. I learned from the best, I said. Just make the call. The rest of the week was a study in psychological warfare. I spent my days hiking the trails of Big Sur, strengthening my body. I spent my evenings reviewing the legal filings Elias sent over. The countersuit for harassment was ready. The restraining order application was drafted. On Friday, Elias confirmed that the leak had worked. My mother had posted on Facebook, God is good. Prayers are answered. Family restoration is coming. They were celebrating. They thought they had broken me. They thought the silence of the last week was me licking my wounds, preparing to crawl back and open my checkbook. They had no idea that while they were popping champagne they couldn't afford, their house was being listed on the county auction website. Item number 492, single-family residence, 12 Oakwood Lane. Minimum bid, $315,000. Sunday arrived, the day of my supposed return. I packed my Rimowa suitcase, but I wasn't flying commercials. I wasn't going to walk through O'Hare arrivals where they might be waiting with a welcome home banner to guilt-trip me. I chartered a private jet. It cost me $15,000, a fraction of what I used to spend on their whims. I flew into a small executive airfield in Gary, Indiana, avoiding the main Chicago hubs entirely. I rented a car, a nondescript gray sedan. I drove into the city under the cover of darkness. I didn't go to my apartment. They might have doormen watching it. I checked into a boutique hotel across the street from the Cook County Courthouse. From my hotel window, I looked out at the city. It was raining. The streets were slick and black. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the hidden folder, a text from my mother. "Taylor, we made your favorite pot roast. What time does your flight land? Dad is waiting to pick you up." I didn't reply. Another text, an hour later. "Are you delayed? Please text us. We are worried." By 10 p.m., the tone shifted. "Where are you? You said you were coming back. Don't do this to us again. Taylor." They were waiting for a savior who was sitting 3 miles away, sipping sparkling water and watching the news. I turned off my phone. I sat at the small desk in the hotel room. I pulled out a piece of hotel stationery and a pen. I needed to write. Not a legal brief, not a spreadsheet, a eulogy. "Why am I doing this?" I wrote. "I am doing this because love is not a transaction. I am doing this because a child should not be an investment plan. I am doing this for the 10-year-old girl who won the science fair and nobody came because Kyle had a soccer game. I am doing this for the 20-year-old who worked 2 jobs in college to send money home, only to be told it wasn't enough. I am doing this for the 30-year-old who lay in a hospital bed with pneumonia from overwork, and the only text she got was a reminder that the country club dues were late." I looked at the words. They blurred slightly as my eyes filled with tears. This was the grief I had postponed, the mourning for the family I wanted, the family I deserved, but the family I would never have. I wiped my eyes. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. This was my armor. Tomorrow morning, at 10 o'clock, the gavel would fall. The house, the physical manifestation of their facade, would be sold to the highest bidder, and I would be there, not to stop it, not to bid. I would be there to witness. I turned off the light and lay in the strange bed. The city noises of Chicago were familiar, yet foreign. I was a stranger in my own life, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I was the one bringing the dawn. The rain in Chicago does not wash things clean. It just makes the grime slicker. From my window on the 12th floor of the W Hotel City Center, I watched the Sunday night downpour batter the gray pavement of Adams Street below. Directly across the street, the massive, imposing stone facade of the Cook County Courthouse loomed like a dormant beast. It was dark now, its windows like empty eyes, but in 12 hours, it would be the stage for the final act of my life as a Valen. I had arrived 3 hours ago, checking in under the name of my shell corporation, Phoenix Holdings. I carried only my Rimowa suitcase and a garment bag containing my armor for tomorrow. The room was quiet, a stark contrast to the cacophony I knew was currently unfolding 30 miles north in Lake Forest. I sat in the velvet armchair by the window, a glass of mineral water in my hand, and I let my mind drift to the estate. I did not need a security camera to see what was happening there. I knew the script by heart because I had been the stage manager for 34 years. They would be waiting. My mother, Cynthia, would have directed the scene. They would be sitting in the formal dining room, huddled in their coats because the heating had been off for 6 days. The temperature inside the house would be hovering around 45 degrees. They would have lit the candelabras not for ambiance, but for necessity. On the table, there would be a meal designed to elicit guilt, perhaps a store-bought rotisserie chicken, cold and greasy, served on the good Wedgwood china. They would have set a place for me at the head of the table. A silent accusation. "She will be here," my father would say, checking his Rolex, which he refused to pawn, even though it could have bought them a month of electricity. "She said Sunday, Taylor is punctual. She's just making a point. She wants to see us suffer," Kyle would mutter, shivering in his scarf. "She wants to walk in and see us freezing so she can feel superior before she turns the power back on." They would wait. 7 o'clock would bleed into 8. 8 would drag into 9. Every set of headlights sweeping across the driveway would make their hearts jump. Is that the Land Rover? Is that the prodigal daughter returning with her checkbook? But the lights would pass. The driveway would remain empty. I took a sip of water. I could feel the ghost of their anxiety vibrating in the air. It was a cruel thing to do. Perhaps, to let them sit in the dark, hungry and cold, waiting for a savior who was currently ordering room service in a warm hotel room. But cruelty was a language they had taught me, and I had become fluent. By 11 o'clock, the anticipation would have turned to panic. I checked the hidden folder on my phone. The notifications were stacking up like firewood. Taylor, it is late. Where are you? The food is cold. Stop playing games. Dad is coughing. If he gets pneumonia, it is your fault. Pick up the phone. I turned the phone over, face down. I did not sleep well, but I slept. It was the fitful, shallow sleep of a soldier the night before a battle. Monday morning broke with a sky the color of a fresh bruise. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a damp, bone-chilling cold. I rose at 6 o'clock. I showered, scrubbing the scent of the Pacific Ocean from my skin and replacing it with the scent of unscented soap. Clinical, clean. I opened the garment bag. Inside hung a suit I had commissioned in Italy 3 years ago but never worn. It was white, stark, blinding, architectural white. It was a suit that demanded attention. It was a suit that said, "I am not here to mourn. I am here to judge." I dressed slowly. The trousers were sharp, the blazer tailored to within a millimeter of perfection. I pulled my hair back into a severe chignon. I applied my makeup minimal, highlighting the sharp angles of my face. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like Taylor the victim. I looked like Taylor the executioner. While I was dressing, the final pin was being pulled from the grenade at the estate. At 8 o'clock in the morning, a nondescript sedan pulled up to the wrought iron gates of 12 Oakwood Lane. A man in a beige windbreaker got out. He carried a roll of heavy-duty orange tape and a large laminated sign. He didn't need to enter the property. He simply affixed the sign to the center of the main gate, smoothing it down against the damp metal. Notice of judicial sale. Public auction. Cook County Sheriff's Office. Date, February 23, 2026. Time, 10 o'clock a.m. I could imagine the moment of discovery. My father. Perhaps venturing out to see if I was parked on the street, or maybe just pacing the grounds in his agitation. He would see the splash of aggressive orange against the black iron. He would walk toward it, squinting without his reading glasses. He would see the words, judicial sale, auction. The scream for Cynthia would be guttural. I picked up my phone. The silence from the night before had been replaced by a digital explosion. Taylor. What is this? There is a sign on the gate. They are selling the house today. Why didn't you tell us? Call me right now. I watched the messages roll in. They were finally seeing reality. For 10 years, I had shielded them from this. I had caught every falling knife before it hit the floor. Now, I let the knives fall. According to the timestamp on a voicemail from Kyle, he had immediately called the family attorney, Mr. Henderson. I played the voicemail on speaker as I put on my pearl earrings. Kyle's voice was high-pitched, cracking with terror. Henderson says it is too late. He says he told you. He says nobody paid the reinstatement fee. Taylor. He says unless we have $3.5 million in a cashier's check by 10 o'clock. The house is gone. $3.5 million. That is the full value. Why didn't you pay the arrears? You said you handled the bills. He was lying. Of course, I had never said I handled the bills this year, and Henderson hadn't told me anything because I hadn't asked, but the number was correct. The bank had accelerated the loan. The time for paying back the missed $40,000 was over. To stop the auction now, they needed to buy the house outright. $3.5 million. It was a number that might as well have been $3.5 billion to them. I checked the time, 9:15. The auction was in 45 minutes. They would be frantic now. They would be running around the house, grabbing jewelry, grabbing cash from hidden safes that were likely empty, looking for anything to bargain with. They would be screaming at each other. My mother would be sobbing that she couldn't lose her home, her status, her life. And then they would remember me. Taylor. Taylor must be coming. That is why she said she was coming back Sunday. She knows. She is going to court. She is going to pay for it there. She likes drama. She wants to save us at the last second. I could almost hear my father's voice, desperate and delusional. "Get in the car. We have to get to the courthouse. She will be there. She is going to fix it." It was time to give them the coordinates. I opened the group chat. I typed slowly, my thumbs hovering over the glass screen. "Do you want to see me? I am at the Cook County Courthouse, room 4, the auction room. Come if you want to see a good show." I hit send. I grabbed my clutch, checked my room key, and walked out of the hotel room. The walk across the street was short. The wind whipped at my white trousers. But I didn't feel the cold. I felt electric. I entered the courthouse. The security check was routine. The guards scanned my bag. I walked through the metal detector. It didn't beep. My heart was made of something harder than steel. But the machine didn't pick that up. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The hallway smelled of floor wax and old paper, the smell of bureaucracy and bad news. Room 4 was at the end of the hall. It was a large, windowless room with rows of wooden benches and a raised podium for the auctioneer. It wasn't a courtroom in the TV sense. There was no jury, no witness stand, just a place where dreams were liquidated. There were about 20 people in the room. Most were investors' men in sharp suits with Bluetooth headsets, women with tablets. They were vultures, circling the carcasses of failed mortgages. They chatted amiably about price per square foot and flip potential. I walked down the center aisle. The click of my white heels on the linoleum floor echoed sharply. Heads turned. In a sea of gray and navy blue, my white suit was a beacon. I took a seat in the very front row, directly in the center. I crossed my legs. I placed my clutch on my lap. I sat with my back straight, my chin held high. I checked my watch, 9:45. They would be racing down the I-90 expressway right now. Kyle would be driving the borrowed sedan or perhaps an Uber, weaving through traffic. Risking their lives to get here, they would be breathless, sweaty, and terrified. 9:50. The auctioneer, a bald man with a bored expression, began arranging his papers on the podium. He tested the microphone. Check. 1, 2. 9:55. The doors at the back of the room burst open. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I heard the heavy breathing. I heard the frantic shuffling of feet. I heard the whisper of, "There she is." My father, Richard Vallon, my mother, Cynthia, my brother, Kyle. They stumbled down the aisle. They looked like refugees from a disaster movie. My father was wearing a suit jacket over a sweater, his hair windblown and thinning. My mother was wearing a fur coat that looked like it had been slept in, her makeup smeared. Kyle looked manic, his eyes darting around the room until they locked onto the back of my head. They rushed toward me. "Taylor." My father gasped, reaching the front row. He grabbed my shoulder. His hand was shaking. "Oh, thank God. Thank God you are here." I slowly turned my head. I looked at his hand on my white blazer. I looked up at his face. "Hello? Richard?" I said. "Not Dad. Richard." "We saw the sign," he panted, ignoring the formality. "The sign on the gate. They are selling it. Henderson said he said $3.5 million. Do you have the check? Did you bring the check?" My mother pushed past him, grabbing my hands. Her fingers were ice cold. "Taylor, baby, please tell me you handled this. Please, I can't lose the house. All my things are there, my memories." Kyle was hovering behind them, looking at the auctioneer who was now watching our drama with mild interest. "Cut the crap, Taylor," Kyle hissed. "Just give them the money. We know you have it. Stop torturing us." The room had gone quiet. The investors were watching. This was better entertainment than a spreadsheet. "I think there is a misunderstanding," I said. My voice was calm, clear, carrying to the back of the room. "I didn't come here to pay." My father froze. "What?" "I didn't bring a check," I said, offering a small, polite smile. "I came to watch." "Watch," my mother whispered, her face going pale. "Yes," I said. "I paid for that house for 10 years. I paid for the roof, the floors, the furniture, and the heating you enjoyed until last week. I feel I have earned the right to see how the story ends." You are joking," my father stammered. A vein in his temple began to throb. This is a sick joke. You wouldn't let them take our home. You are my daughter. I was your daughter, I corrected. Then I became your bank. And now I am just a spectator. Ladies and gentlemen, the auctioneer's voice boomed through the microphone, cutting through the tension. Please take your seats. The judicial sale for the morning docket is about to begin. First item up for bid. The property located at 12 Oakwood Lane, Lake Forest. My father looked at the podium, then back at me. The terror in his eyes was absolute. Taylor, please, he begged. His voice broke. It was the first time I had ever heard him beg. I will do anything. I will sign whatever you want. Just stop this. Don't let them take it. I can't stop it. Richard, I said softly. You stopped it. You stopped paying the mortgage 11 months ago. You spent the money on vacations. You spent the money on gambling. This isn't my doing. This is gravity. I will kill you, Kyle screamed, lunging forward. Two bailiffs who had been standing by the wall moved instantly. They stepped between Kyle and me. One of them put a hand on Kyle's chest. Sit down, sir, the bailiff ordered. Or leave. Those are your options. Kyle was shaking with impotent rage. He looked at me, his eyes full of hate. I looked back, my expression bored. Sit down, Kyle, I said. The show is starting. Defeated. They collapsed onto the bench next to me. My mother was weeping into her hands. My father was staring blankly at the auctioneer. Kyle was chewing his fingernails. I sat perfectly still in my white suit. I felt a strange, vibrating energy in the air. It was the feeling of a bridge burning, the flames licking at the sky. And for the first time, I wasn't the one holding the hose. I was the one holding the match. Opening bid, the auctioneer announced, looking down at his papers. $315,000. Do I hear $315? A paddle went up in the third row. I have $315, the auctioneer droned. Do I hear $350? I turned to my parents. You might want to pay attention, I whispered. This is the most expensive event you have ever attended. And then, I turned my eyes to the front, and I watched my inheritance evaporate. The air in room 4 was so heavy it felt like it had mass, pressing down on my shoulders, filling my lungs with the scent of floor wax and stale fear. The auctioneer had just announced the opening bid for 12 Oakwood Lane, $315,000, a pittance, a fraction of what the estate was worth, but enough to cover the debt my parents had decided was optional. My father, Richard, was vibrating beside me. I could feel the tremors running through the wooden bench. His face was a map of panic, sweat beading on his upper lip despite the chill in the room. He turned to me, his eyes wild and bloodshot. Taylor, he hissed, his voice low but laced with a desperate fury. Raise your hand. Raise your hand right now. Do you hear me? Buy it back. I looked at him. I did not blink. I did not move. I sat with my hands folded over my clutch, my white suit gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights like a slab of marble. No, I said. The word was quiet, but in the tense silence of the room, it landed like a gunshot. What did you say to me? Richard's voice rose, cracking with disbelief. The veneer of the respectable businessman, the facade he had worn for 40 years, finally shattered. I am your father. I command you to buy this house. I don't take orders from you anymore. Richard, I replied, my voice steady, devoid of any warmth. And I don't pay for mistakes I didn't make. Something inside him snapped. It was a physical break, a wire pulling tight and severing. He surged to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the linoleum. You ungrateful little bitch, he screamed. He raised his hand. I saw the movement in slow motion, the heavy palm, the gold signet ring on his pinky, the same hand that used to pat my head when I brought home an A+ and ignored me when I didn't. He swung for my face. I didn't flinch. I didn't need to. Before his hand could make contact, a shadow detached itself from the row behind us. A large hand, encased in a black glove, shot out and caught Richard's wrist in midair. It was a vice grip. My father gasped, freezing in place. He looked up to see a man standing 6 feet 4 inches tall, with a neck as thick as a tree trunk. This was Stone, a private security contractor I had hired through Elias yesterday. I knew my father. I knew that when he lost control of the narrative, he tried to control the bodies around him. "Sit down, sir," Stone said. His voice was a low rumble, dangerous and final. "Do not touch Ms. Vallon." Richard looked at the bodyguard, then at me. The realization that I had anticipated his violence, that I had prepared for it, seemed to shrink him. He slumped back onto the bench, defeated and breathing hard. But the silence was short-lived. My mother, Cynthia, saw that aggression had failed. So, she switched to her preferred weapon martyrdom. She threw her head back and let out a wail that sounded like a siren. It was theatrical, practiced, and loud enough to turn every head in the room. "Oh, God," she sobbed, clutching her chest. "My own daughter, my own flesh and blood. She is letting us die. She is letting us rot in the street." The investors in the room began to whisper. I could hear the murmur of judgment. "What is her mother? That is harsh. Who does that to their parents?" Cynthia looked around, making eye contact with strangers, playing to the gallery. "We gave her everything," she cried, tears streaming down her face, real tears, fueled by self-pity. "We raised her. We sacrificed for her education. And now she sits there in her expensive suit and laughs at us. She is a monster." The whispering grew louder. The auctioneer banged his gavel, but the sound was swallowed by the drama. I felt a flash of heat in my chest. No shame, not embarrassment, anger, pure, crystalline anger. For 34 years, I had let them write the story. I had let them paint me as the cold one, the distant one, the ATM machine with a heartbeat. Not today. I stood up. I did not scream. I did not wail. I simply stood, smoothing the front of my white blazer. My movement was so calm, so deliberate, that it commanded silence more effectively than the gavel. I turned to face my parents, but I pitched my voice so that it carried to the back of the room. "You are right, Mom," I said. Cynthia stopped crying for a second, looking up with a glimmer of hope. "You and Dad told me something 2 weeks ago," I continued, my voice ringing clear and sharp. "You said, and I quote, 'You have never given this family anything. You said my contributions were just obligations. You said I gave you nothing of value.'" I took a step closer to them. The investors were leaning forward, captivated. "So," I said, "today, I am here to prove you right. If I have given you nothing, then stopping now should change nothing. I will not give you the salvation you feel entitled to." "You are lying," Kyle shouted from the other side of Mother. "You are just greedy. You kept all the money for yourself." "Is that so?" I asked. I reached into my oversized leather tote bag. I pulled out a dossier. It was 3 inches thick, bound with a heavy black clip. I dropped it onto the wooden bench in front of them. Thud! The sound echoed in the room. "This," I said, pointing to the file, "is a comprehensive audit of every single dollar I have transferred to this family in the last 10 years. Do you want to know the total? It is $1,942,560. The room gasped. I heard a low whistle from one of the real estate sharks in the back. "Nearly $2 million, I repeated, staring my father in the eyes. "That is what I gave. And what did you do with it?" I reached into the file and pulled out a single sheet of paper, a copy of the foreclosure notice, stapled to a bank statement. "I sent you $8,000 every month for the mortgage and taxes," I said, my voice cutting like a scalpel. "Every single month, for 10 years, but this house is being sold today because you haven't paid the bank in 11 months. Where did the money go?" "Richard." He couldn't meet my eyes. He looked at his shoes. "I will tell you where it went," I said, answering my own question. "It went to the Ritz-Carlton in Maui. It went to the Horseshoe Casino. It went to Saks Fifth Avenue. You took the roof over your head and you wore it. You drank it. You gambled it away." "That is private business," Cynthia screeched, her face flushing red. How dare you air our laundry in public? You aired it when you brought me to this courthouse, I shot back. You stole from me. You stole the tax money I sent you. That is fraud. Mother, and I have the receipts. You are cold-blooded, Kyle yelled, standing up again. Though he stayed out of Stone's reach, his face was twisted in an ugly sneer. Look at you, standing there like you are better than us. You are going to let Mom and Dad live on the street. You are going to let them be homeless. What kind of daughter are you? I turned my gaze to Kyle, my brother, the golden boy, the 40-year-old toddler. I am the daughter who resigned, I said. But let us talk about you. Kyle, you are asking me why I am letting them go homeless. I stepped closer to him. He flinched. You are 40 years old, I said, my voice dripping with disdain. You have 4 functioning limbs. You have a college degree that I paid off. Why is it my job to house them? Why isn't it yours? Kyle opened his mouth, but no sound came out. You have lived off my payroll for a decade, I continued, relentlessly. You drive a car I lease. You wear suits I bought. You send your children to a school I pay for. Well, guess what, Kyle? The nanny just quit. Today, you get to be the man of the house. You figure out where they sleep tonight. You figure out how to feed them. Because I am done. Kyle looked as if I had slapped him. The reality of his own impotence washed over him. He looked at our parents, then back at me, terror filling his eyes. He had nothing. He was nothing without me. Order, the auctioneer bellowed, finally regaining control of his room. Order in the court. This is a judicial sale, not a family therapy session. If there are any further outbursts, I will have the bailiffs clear the room. Do I make myself clear? The room fell into a stunned silence. I sat back down. I smoothed my skirt. I crossed my legs. Stone, the bodyguard, sat down behind me, crossing his arms. My parents and Kyle sat frozen, looking like statues made of ash. They were shrinking before my eyes. We will proceed with the auction of 12 Oakwood Lane, the auctioneer said, looking at his papers. The opening bid is $315,000. Do I have a bidder? $315, a man in the second row called out, raising a yellow paddle. I have $315, the auctioneer chanted, falling into the rhythmic cadence of the sale. Looking for $350,000. $350. Do I hear $350? $350, a woman in a gray suit shouted. $350 is bid. Looking for $400. $400,000 for a 6-bedroom estate in Lake Forest. $400. $400, the man in the second row countered. Beside me, my father began to weep. It wasn't the loud, performative crying of my mother. It was a soft, broken sound. He leaned toward me, grabbing the sleeve of my blazer. His grip was weak. Taylor, he whispered, please, I am begging you. I will change. I swear to God, I will change. I will get a job. I will stop gambling. Just lift your hand. You have the money. I know you have the money. Don't let them take it. It is my legacy. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had told his friends I was an investment, not a person. I looked at the man who had called my boss to try and get me fired 3 days ago. $450,000, the woman shouted. $450, the auctioneer sang. $500, do I hear $500? $500, a new bidder, a man in a trench coat, called out from the back. Dad, I said softly, leaning in close so only he could hear. You don't have a legacy, you have a debt, and today, the bill is due. Please, he sobbed, tears dripping onto his lapel. I love you. You are my little girl. I was your little girl, I said. Now, I am just a spectator. I turned my face away from him. I looked straight ahead at the auctioneer. I became a statue, a marble figure in a white suit, unmoving, unbreathing, unyielding. $550,000, the first bidder shouted. $600,000, the woman countered. The price was climbing. It was still absurdly low for the property value, but it was money my family didn't have. Every number shouted out was a hammer blow to their existence. 650,000. 700,000. My mother was rocking back and forth, clutching her rosary beads, mumbling prayers. Kyle was staring at the floor, picking at a loose thread on his trousers, disassociated from reality. $750,000, the auctioneer called. Going once at 750,000. I watched the proceedings with a detached curiosity. This house had been the stage for every painful memory of my childhood. The dining room where I was told I wasn't good enough. The study where my father hid his gin. The bedroom where I cried myself to sleep. I was watching them sell a haunted house. 800,000, the man in the back called. 800,000. Do I hear 825? Silence. The room hesitated. 800,000 going once, the auctioneer said, scanning the room. My father gripped my arm so hard it hurt. Taylor cue something. I gently peeled his fingers off my arm, one by one. I placed his hand back on his own knee. Going twice, the auctioneer said. I took a deep breath. The air in the room didn't smell like fear anymore. It smelled like rain. It smelled like the ocean at Big Sur. It smelled like freedom. Sold, the auctioneer said, slamming his gavel down. To bidder number 42 for $800,000. The sharp crack of the gavel was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a spine breaking. My mother let out a strangled gasp and slumped against Kyle. My father put his head in his hands and let out a long, low moan of absolute despair. The house was gone. 12 Oakwood Lane no longer belonged to the Valen family. It belonged to bidder number 42. I looked at the man who had won. He was a stranger. He had no idea he had just bought a monument to dysfunction. He just saw a cheap asset. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. I waited for the regret. I waited for the guilt to rush in and drown me. I waited to feel like a bad daughter. But it didn't come. All I felt was the beat of my own heart, steady and strong. I stood up. The movement drew the eyes of my shattered family. They looked up at me, their faces gray and aged, looking for some sign that I would fix this, that I would go to the winner and buy it back, that this was all just a cruel lesson. I looked down at them. You should probably pack, I said. The new owner will want the keys by Friday. And with that, I turned my back on them. I walked up the aisle, my heels clicking a rhythm of finality. I didn't look back at the sobbing figures on the bench. I walked toward the exit, toward the light in the hallway, toward the rest of my life. The sound of the gavel striking the wood block was not just a noise. It was a physical impact. Crack. It hit the air like a gunshot, severing the artery of the Valen family history. The echo bounced off the cheap paneling of the auction room, vibrating in the silence that followed. Sold, the auctioneer repeated, his voice bored and bureaucratic. To bidder number 42 for $800,000. Congratulations. Sir, please approach the bench to finalize the deposit. Beside me, the collapse was total. My mother, Cynthia, let out a sound that I can only describe as the air leaving a tire. Her eyes rolled back in her head, a theatrical gesture she had perfected over years of getting out of speeding tickets, and she slumped sideways. She didn't hit the floor, of course. She made sure to land heavily against Kyle's shoulder, ensuring she had support. Mom! Mom! Kyle screamed, his voice cracking. He looked around the room, wild-eyed. Somebody call a doctor. She is having a heart attack. My sister killed her. The investors nearby shuffled their feet, looking uncomfortable. They were here for property, not a soap opera. My father, Richard, didn't scream. He simply deflated. The rage that had fueled him moments ago, the entitlement that had kept his spine straight for 60 years, evaporated. He slid off the bench, landing on his knees on the dirty linoleum floor. He stared at the auctioneer's podium as if he were staring at a firing squad. Gone, he whispered. It is all gone. I sat perfectly still. My white suit was unblemished. My hands were steady. I watched my mother peek through one slightly open eye to see if anyone was rushing to her aid. When she saw no paramedics appearing, she let out another moan, louder this time. "Get up, Mother," I said, my voice cutting through her performance. "The floor is filthy." "You monster," Kyle spat at me, struggling to hold Cynthia's weight. "You sat there and watched. You have the money. I know you have it. You did this to humiliate us." "I did this," I said calmly, "to free you. You are welcome." At that moment, the winner of the auction bidder 42 turned away from the clerk's desk. He was a man in his 50s, wearing a trench coat that looked like it cost more than Kyle's car. He had silver hair and the shark-like grin of a man who eats distress sales for breakfast. He began walking up the aisle. He was walking straight toward us. My father saw him coming. I saw a spark ignite in Richard's dull eyes, a desperate, delusional spark. Richard scrambled to his feet, wiping his face with a trembling hand. He grabbed my mother's arm. "Cynthia, Cynthia, look, wake up." My mother's fainting spell miraculously ended. She straightened up, blinking rapidly. "He is coming over here," my father whispered, his voice trembling with sudden, frantic hope. "Taylor, did you know him? Is he one of your people? Is this a proxy?" The logic of desperation took hold of them. In their minds, it was impossible that I would actually let the house go. It was impossible that the Valen estate would fall. Therefore, this must be a trick, a cruel, elaborate lesson I was teaching them before I handed the keys back. "Oh, thank God," my mother breathed, clutching her pearls. "She bought it. She hired him to buy it so the bank wouldn't know. It is a tax thing, isn't it? Taylor, it is a tax strategy." Kyle's face shifted from rage to a smug, knowing sneer. "I knew it," he muttered. "She is a bitch, but she needs us. She couldn't actually go through with it." They stood up straighter. They wiped their eyes. They prepared to be gracious, to forgive me for my little stunt as long as I handed over the deed. The man in the trench coat stopped directly in front of me. He ignored my parents completely. He extended a hand toward me. "Ms. Valen," he said, his voice deep and gravelly. I stood up and shook his hand. "Mr. Sterling, good to see you again." My father let out a breathless laugh. "I knew it, Mr. Sterling, a friend of yours. Taylor, well played. You really had us going there. A bit dramatic for my taste, but point taken. Now, when can we move back in?" "Mr. Sterling turned his head slowly to look at my father. His expression was not one of friendship. It was one of mild amusement. "Move back in?" Sterling asked. "I am afraid there is a misunderstanding. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. My crews arrive on Friday morning." The color drained from Richard's face so fast he looked like a corpse. "What but Taylor? I don't understand." Sterling turned back to me. "I just wanted to thank you. Taylor, the geological surveys and the structural blueprints you sent over last week were incredibly helpful. Knowing exactly where the load-bearing walls are will save us a fortune in demolition costs." "Demolition," Kyle squeaked. "Oh, yes," Sterling said, pulling a tablet from his coat pocket. "The house is in a teardown. The foundation is cracked. The wiring is shot, deferred maintenance, I assume. But the land. The land is gold. We are rezoning it. We are putting up 3 luxury condo towers, 40 units per tower." He tapped the screen and showed me a rendering. "We are calling it the Phoenix Complex. Fitting. Don't you think?" My mother let out a scream that shattered glass. "You are tearing it down, my home, my beautiful home." "It is not your home, ma'am," Sterling said coldly. "It is a construction site, and I advise you to be out by Thursday, or the sheriff will remove you." He turned back to me. "We couldn't have navigated the zoning board loophole without your tip about the Historical Society designation being expired. That was brilliant. Taylor, Apex Meridian really breeds the best sharks." "I'll try my best," I said smoothly. "Enjoy the investment, Mr. Sterling. It is a prime location." "Pleasure doing business," he said. He nodded to me, ignored my family, and walked out of the courtroom. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a crater after the bomb had gone off. My family stood there, processing the magnitude of my betrayal, I hadn't just refused to buy the house. I had actively helped the enemy destroy it. I had provided the blueprints for their oblivion. I hadn't just cut the branch they were sitting on. I had poisoned the roots of the tree. You, my father whispered. He looked at me with genuine fear. For the first time, he didn't see his daughter. He saw a stranger, a dangerous, powerful stranger. You helped him. You told him how to tear it down. I told you, Richard, I said. I am a crisis manager, and sometimes the only way to end a crisis is to remove the asset entirely. Why? My mother sobbed, sinking back onto the bench. Why do you hate us so much? I don't hate you, I said. Hate implies passion. I feel nothing. I just wanted to make sure that there was no safety net left. As long as that house stood, you would think you had a place to hide. You would think you were aristocrats temporarily embarrassed by cash flow. Now you are just people, like everyone else. I picked up my clutch. I adjusted the lapel of my white blazer. And Kyle, I said, looking at my brother who was staring at the floor, catatonic. You mentioned earlier that I should think about your children. I did. I paid their tuition for the year, anonymously. But don't bother trying to get a refund. I locked the account. They will be educated. You, however, will have to get a job. I turned to leave. My father lunged forward and grabbed my wrist. His grip was weak, desperate. Taylor, he croaked, where are you going? You can't leave us here. We have nowhere to go. We have no money. What are we supposed to do? I looked down at his hand on my wrist. I remembered all the times that hand had pointed at me in judgment. I remembered all the times it had palm up, waiting for a check. I leaned in close. I brought my lips right to his ear. So close I could smell the stale fear on him. You were right, Dad, I whispered. The words were soft, intimate, a secret just for him. You said I never gave this family anything. You were absolutely right. I gave you money. I gave you time. I gave you my youth. I gave you my loyalty. But to you, that was nothing. So, I took it all back. I gave everything. But today, I am taking back my life. I pulled back. His eyes were wide, staring into the abyss. Good luck, Richard, I said. I pulled my arm free. He didn't fight me. He didn't have the strength. I turned around and walked up the center aisle. Behind me, the wailing started again. It was a chorus of regret, panic, and accusation. I heard my mother screaming my name. I heard Kyle kicking the bench. I heard my father weeping. But the sounds were fading. With every step I took toward the double doors at the back of the room, the noise became quieter, like a radio station losing its signal. I pushed the heavy doors open. The hallway was bright. Sunlight was streaming in through the high windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The smell of stale floor wax was gone, replaced by the scent of fresh rain and city ozone. I walked to the elevator. I pressed the button for the ground floor. Stone, my bodyguard, stepped in beside me. Is it done, Ms. Vallon? He asked. It is done, I said. Where to? The airport, I said. We walked out of the courthouse and onto Adams Street. The storm had passed. The sky was a brilliant, piercing blue. The Chicago wind was cold. But it felt cleansing. It felt like a baptism. My nondescript gray rental car was waiting at the curb. I tossed my bag into the passenger seat. I paused for 1 second. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen was lit up with notifications. Missed calls from Dad. Missed calls from Mom. Texts from Kyle threatening to sue. Begging for mercy. Cursing my name. I didn't unlock it. I used my fingernail to pop open the SIM card tray. I pulled the tiny chip out. It was a small piece of plastic, but it held the weight of 34 years of obligation. There was a trash can on the corner, overflowing with soggy newspapers and coffee cups. I flicked the SIM card into the trash. It landed on a discarded wrapper. I got into the car. I turned the key. The engine purred. I pulled away from the curb, merging into the traffic. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't look up at the third-floor window of the courthouse. I drove toward the highway. I passed the exit for my apartment. I passed the exit for my office. I kept driving. I was heading to O'Hare. I didn't have a return ticket. I didn't have a plan. I had a bank account that was finally mine, a future that was unwritten, and a silence that was beautiful. The road stretched out before me, endless and open. I turned on the radio. Music filled the car. I smiled. The screen fades to black. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a long journey for Taylor, but she finally found her freedom. I would love to hear your thoughts. Where are you listening from right now? Are you in your car, at work, or relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments section below so we can connect. And if you enjoyed this story of justice and liberation, please subscribe to the Family Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people who might need the courage to stand up for themselves. See you in the next story.